may not believe this unless you already know the story of this band, but Entrails have been around since the year 1990. They were actually a band for 8 years until 1998. There's no recorded material that actually exists of this time period, just a handful of songs that were eventually released about 10 years later in 2008. Yeah, that's right. These guys were a band for 8 years, took a 10-year hiatus because nothing was really happening back in the 1990s for this group, and then came back with a vengeance in 2008 and have been a band that's been on many people's radars ever since, mine included. So it's only right that here in 2015 that we take a look at their new album, Obliteration. Now, Entrails is a band that certainly has a lot of debts to pay to Swedish death metal, which makes a lot of sense considering they're from the country, but I'm looking specifically at a group called Entombed. Yes, there's a lot of debt to be paid to that particular band, and it's tremendous. It's great. I love the fact that they use this group as such a huge paramount influence to their sound, because here in 2015, it really showcases just the depth and how far that sonically we have come ever since the release of great Entombed classics such as Left Hand Path. This is an album, though, that is really spotlit by its top-notch production work, but also with the fact that it is one dirty motherfucker. Vocally speaking, this is one that can easily go from having that gruff and kind of ugly style of death metal vocals that can easily then denigrate even further to snarling gargles, either that or could potentially rise above into a torture-sounding scream. It's one that's not exactly the most dynamic of death metal vocalists that you're going to hear out there. However, it is one that for this style, for this Swedish brand of death metal that Entrails have been delivering, it really, really fits, and it fits very, very well. Now, many people may be a little bit dissuaded by the fact that Metal Blade Records has picked these guys up, have been releasing these albums, and I don't understand why people would think that, because I listened to this album, I listened to Obliteration, and these 10 tracks give me and paint me a much different story. This paints me a story of a band that's attempting to make a Swedish death metal classic with this album, trying to take Obliteration and their own careers over the top even further than where they have already been, and they've definitely gained some momentum throughout the past 6 years, so don't rest on these guys. Obliteration definitely starts off with something that just immediately makes me harken back to a few years ago, and that's the song No Cross Left Unturned, which of course reminds me of Leave No Stone Unturned, which was on the Underground Resistance by Darkthrone 2 years ago in 2013. And I think that was Leave No Cross Unturned, I apologize. But either way, whenever you have a song like this that really takes you right into the meat and potatoes of what Entrails sound is all about, that really kind of introduces you to that core idea right from the start, right from the get-go, and doesn't exactly just kind of have you walk into the shallow end of the pool. They instead throw you right into the deep end, and they don't even fucking care about the diving board or anything like that. They just toss you in. They literally pick you up like a bully and just toss you in. That actually shows a lot for this band's character, not to mention it also showcases just how much they believe in their sound, just how much they really feel that this sound has a ton of character, not to mention it just kicks ass. And then we get to Epitome of Death. I have to speak about this song because here's a free idea. The WWE could actually use this for The Undertaker, because they actually use, or actually perform a guitar version of the Funeral Dirge. Now, this is not necessarily uncommon in metal music. This is something that's happened before. However, this is after, it's not something that starts a song, which always seems to be the cliche. This is instead something that is near the end point of the track, which some may say is just as cliche, but I disagree. Simply because this has a great body as far as the song is concerned that goes along with it. This is something where everything that is presented on Epitome of Death is fantastically addicting, not to mention also just solidly performed. I really enjoy how the introduction to this song really kind of gets your head snapping a little bit. It really gets you banging. It's not one that's going to be making you go at 10,000 miles an hour. Instead, kind of gives you this like little slow build that eventually ramps up into the aggression, into the speed, into the pure and adulterated death metal. Not to mention, this is a song where you hear the release of one of those just guttural groans that is just phenomenal in Swedish-style death metal. It's no wonder that these guys are associated with Dan Swano. I mean, that just makes sense, right? The rest of this album really paints a picture of a group that has become exceptionally comfortable with their writing style, but is still not afraid to take a couple of keynote risks. It's one where I feel that the Entombed influence that Entrails possess only works advantageously to their behalf as opposed to being a shortcoming. This is a style that definitely still has a lot of relevance here in 2015, not to mention it's a style that still could work wonderfully in 2015 if enough people gave it a chance. I feel like this is a group that could easily take off amongst the death metal faithful here in America if enough people were to be curious enough to give this album a chance. And I feel that the cover of this album, which was I think represented somewhere in this video, hopefully, if I remember to do that. I'm horrid with memory. You take a look at this and it immediately gives you that picture of this is a death metal album. This is a death metal album that I should check out. This is a death metal album that reminds me of the old school and is going to remind me why the old school is still very, very relevant today. It is not corny and played out. This is why Entrails kicks the ass off a band such as 6 Feet Under. And that's just the truth. You take a comparison, listen to the newest 6 Feet Under album and this Entrails album, Obliteration, and there's no freaking comparison. The Entrails album stomps it to pieces almost as though it's curb stomping it. So what do we talk about whenever it comes to ranking? And the one thing that I will say is that while this album really flows exceptionally well, and while this album does have just enough diversity to really keep you interested and keep you really involved with the disc, I was a bit disappointed with Reanimation of the Dead. I felt like they had a great potential to have a phenomenal finisher, and it was a song that was just kind of average at best, maybe slightly above average. So that was a bit of a nitpicky disappointment, but hey, something that I consider to be a middle-of-the-road or slightly above-average track may be someone else's favorite song, so who am I to really judge on that? However, this is an album that, because of its strengths, really it plays into its favor, and it also really ascertains that we're going to have to study and look at this band's progress even more closely in years to come, considering we now get to examine how their career will morph and change, and how they will take that Swedish death metal sound and morph it into their own, where they become the forefathers of this genre, where they kind of become the modern-day equivalents of a band such as Entombed within that genre, and where they become sort of the standard bearers for the genre. Now, I understand that, technically speaking, as far as age is concerned, Entombed are, just slightly older than them, so they're practically peers, but that doesn't matter. This is all within the musical release relevance. I would give this album an 86 out of 100. I was really impressed by this. I really enjoyed this disc, and I feel that there are really more fans of this style out there than meets the eye. And I feel that a lot of these releases tend to elude them a little bit whenever they first come out, but once they hear about them, they do tend to pick them up. But this is one that if you are an old school death metal practitioner, or at least a fan of those styles out there, give this album a try. Give this one a listen. This is well worth it. Now, for those of you who have already listened to this album, who already know of this and the like, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. Did you love this disc, or was it not really what you were expecting? Let me know in the comments below, and we will talk, well, sooner rather than later, because we have a lot of new releases to speak about today. So I'm going to get back to it. You leave me some comments about this album. Thanks.